Hey, welcome to the festive Christmas monovlog from Blogging Heads TV. I was going to do one with Eric Alterman. It fell through. Eric's computer crashed. So I'm throwing up this monovlog because Bob Wright, the mogul behind Blogging Heads TV, is a stern taskmaster and demands fresh content. Because there won't be the back and forth, there won't be the interchange you usually get, but we make it up with lack of volume. In other words, it will be really short, which I think is a virtue. Unlike talk radio where they try to string it out, we try to keep it short. All three topics I have relate to the campaign. The first one is the dropping out of the Democratic candidates Evan Bayh and Mark Warner. And Mark Warner is thinking of reconsidering. It was a little suspicious why he dropped out in the first place. The centrist governor of Virginia, quite appealing, a little boring, not as boring as Evan Bayh. And my point is that we don't know what's happening here. Usually, when you're covering a political race, you can sort of see why a candidate is changing his positions, why this is happening, why that is happening. This is on a deep insider level why these guys are dropping out that we may never find out. I find that there's sort of three levels. If you're completely unsophisticated about politics, you think that, it's just a question of people thuggishly pushing each other out of the race and blackmailing them and people visiting them in the dead of night and telling them they have an opposition dossier on them and they better get out. If you're more sophisticated than that, you realize that it's all about the issues, and it's really it's not nearly as crude as those uninformed people think. And when you're even more sophisticated, you realize it's completely crude, and it involves people visiting in the dead of night and threatening people with Oppo files, and it is exactly what the uninformed people think. So most people, I think, are at this middle level, but in fact, we don't know who visited Mark Warner and may have convinced him to leave the race. We don't know who visited Evan Bayh and convinced him to leave the race. Walter Shapiro has some complex theory about how Bayh didn't have enough money and he realized that it was either going to be Hillary or Obama. I don't believe it. I mean, you run for president, that's how you get exposure. So you don't raise money, so you drop out. It could have been Hillary. Somebody from Hillary visited Evan Bayh and said, look, you want to be vice president? Don't run against us. A completely legitimate thing to do, but you're not going to find it out. Nobody's going to report it. Nobody's going to tell it. All these things happen at some level that the public doesn't know about. That's my point. Unless some brilliant reporter uncovers it, but I don't believe it. But, if you can't drive Bill Richardson from the race, who can you drive from the race? That's what I say. The second point has to do with Barack Obama. In the early 80s, I was assigned to do a piece on an up-and-coming senator named Gary Hart. He was a first-term senator. He'd, of course, run George McGovern's campaign. And he seemed like a little bit of a cipher to me, but he had elaborate policy positions on all sorts of issues. He knew there were 5 different kinds of guaranteed income. He knew he had a plan for energy. Most important of all, he had an elaborately worked out program of military reform. Smaller is less isn't less, more isn't more, smaller is better. Maneuver warfare. It had a real impact on the world. Obama at this point has none of that. He doesn't even reach the substantive level of Gary, where's the beef Hart? If you read the profiles about him, he's all about being, reflective and introspective about his own character. I believe in character, but the way you show character is by grappling with the issues, not by grappling with your own character, not by talking about your own character. What exactly, this isn't a question of where's the beef, it's where's the bun. There's nothing there that one can sink one's teeth into. He he showed some sign of bucking the Democratic trend by voting against liberals in the class action bill. But did he strike out a new position on the class action bill? Did he give a big speech, explaining why he hated the trial lawyers? I don't think so. And he proposed this somewhat innovative trade-off of pension funds. The government takes over the pension funds of the automakers in exchange for higher fuel mileage standards. That was an interesting idea. So that's one. John Heilman makes some of the similar points in a piece that I just read in New York Magazine. It's not enough to transcend the issues easier. It's easy to show anguish about your own personal character, and it's easy to not deal with the issues, but transcend the issues. I'm beyond the issues. I for the sides coming together and forging a third way. Well, it's easy to talk about that. Show us. Clinton showed us on welfare. He said everybody gets 2 years and then they have to work. That was a position that neither the left or the right took. He was willing to spend the money to get people to work. That was an interesting position. The obvious area, it seems to me, that's ripe for that position is immigration. Have some position where we want a lot of immigrants to come in, but we want to control the border first, and we want to protect American wages and the wages of the people who are here already, even though we recognize the contribution immigrants make, without any of the sort of the vicious, nasty rhetoric that didn't seem to work in the last election. It wouldn't be hard to get to Bush's right on immigration, while not being a noxious anti-immigrant voice. Obama has none of that. He gives a speech that when he voted for the Senate, basically the Bush-McCain immigration bill, amnesty plus employer sanctions, he gave a speech that was totally in keeping with democratic orthodoxy, using the arguments of democratic orthodoxy. He said, there has to be a path to citizenship. I'm not going to vote for any bill that doesn't have a path to citizenship for those already here. Well, that is the Democratic position. That could have been written by any, policy guy at the Democratic National Committee. We turned to the president of the Harvard Law Review for some innovative wrestling with policy, and I'm a Clinton guy. I'm a self-hating Democrat. I want to see Obama take on a big Democratic interest group, not just the trial lawyers, because they're easy, but tell the Democrats something they don't want to hear. Show us. That's how you show us character, as opposed to talking about your grappling with your complex racial identity. Finally, John McCain has run into trouble with bloggers, rightly so, because of his advocacy of campaign finance reform. And I supported McCain-Feingold generally because there were these fundraisers where the official, campaign of a presidential candidate would go, and they'd have a banquet, and there'd be corporations. They'd be giving tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was incredibly corrupt and disgusting. And in terms of giving to official campaigns or to the official campaign committee, in terms of corporations giving, unions giving, McCain-Feingold was perfectly sensible to regulate them. But now the Federal Elections Commission, in seeking to control the 527 loophole, which is how a lot of people like George Soros put money into the campaign last time, also Swift Boats for Truth, also MoveOn.com, so people from opposing sides of the spectrum used this loophole. They've thrown a very wide net, and they claim that the federal election laws now regulate, quote, any committee, club, association, or other group of persons who receives contributions of more than $1,000 or expends more than $1,000. And that was always there in the law, but the definition of what you had to do to be a political committee like this was restricted. And now they've opened it up, and they're basically going to say if we think your main purpose is politics, even though you try to hide it, we're going to nail you, and you're going to have to register and have a treasurer and go through all this paperwork at the least. And I always, this is my problem with campaign finance reform. I always worried that if I looked at it too closely, I would get off the train at the first stop. These people aren't corporations. They're any two individuals who get together. So, if Marty Peretz and somebody else want to get together and give $2,000 to support welfare reform, he can't do that with under this ruling without going through a bunch of paperwork. I always thought America was the country where, if you want to spend $1,001 or $2,001 with a buddy of yours to denounce the government, you could do it. I thought that's what distinguished us from Iran. Probably, Ahmadinejad could look into some of these regulations and put them to work. I do think that, given the extent that McCain seems to be completely deaf to First Amendment issues, that it will rightly hurt him. You could argue that this broadcast probably cost a little more than $1,000. I got an expensive camera. I got a computer. But it's probably $1,000. So if I say, that we should vote Democratic in 2008, which I just said, maybe I'm already in violation of the campaign finance laws, or maybe the whole blogging heads enterprise, which is definitely anti-Bush in tone, certainly costs more than $1,000, involves more than two people. Maybe that violates the law. So they should go after Bob Wright. I like that idea better. So, Copper, if you're listening, go after Bob Wright. If you email me, maybe I'll drop a dime on him and tell you where he lives. Anyway, I do think we're heading for some test case where some individual is collared by the FEC and goes to jail and becomes a big cause celeb. The Supreme Court may let him off the hook, but it'll be very difficult to do that in a principled way. Okay, those are my three topics. I'm going to leave you with my pick for the best Christmas song ever, which is a really crappy Elton John song called Step Into Christmas. Crappy because the words are really awful and insipid, but as performed by The Wedding Present, you can't hear the words. All you hear is noise. So have a good holiday season, and see you soon on bloggingheads.tv.